Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Hey, thank you so much for coming. It's so great to see your faces. This is a casual event, so please take care of your needs. If you need to use the bathroom, there's bathrooms directly across the hall. There's gendered bathrooms. There's also a single stall bathroom in between the two. The food and drink are going to stay out there, so if you get hungry in the middle, don't hesitate to get up and go get yourself something to eat and come back. We have a really exciting list of presenters for you. My name is Bethany Barrett. I'm one of the assistant principals here. And this has been sort of my dream to have a set of community evenings that involve students and staff and family members and the community at large to come to learn about topics that are of interest to the community. So this was a topic that was of interest, and it's May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so it's just a great mix. I'm going to tell you one other thing, and that is all throughout the evening, there's going to be a QR code that pops up in between every session, and that's a way for you to ask questions you might have during the course of the evening. At the end, we're going to bring everyone up, and then we're going to moderate the questions that you've asked and ask the panelists to answer those questions. So one of the ways you can do that is actually using the note cards that are scattered throughout the tables. I have a few more back here that I'll just put on the back bookshelf. I don't have pens on the table, so we might have to share some pens if you would like to use that. But let me show you a really cool way that you can do it without using pens. That way. It's this way. So if you want to use your phone, if you've never used a QR code, I'll explain how to use it. You put your phone on camera mode, and you point it at the screen at this QR code, and it pops up with a website. And all it has is just a box for you to ask a question. You can ask as many questions as you like. As soon as you write the question, you just push submit. I'm going to have this QR code at the end of every session. So if you're thinking of a question in the middle and you can't find that QR code, jot yourself a note on the note card, or wait until that session's over, and I'm going to put that QR code back up. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. So I'm really excited. Our very first, one other thing before I forget. If you didn't get a chance to look at some of the tables outside, we have 3 organizations that are tabling right now. One is Mad Hope, which is actually the sort of parent organization of our very last session around being a trusted adult. And can you remind me your name?
Sophie.
Sophie, right here, if you wave your hand, is actually set up that table. So if you have questions about what Mad Hope does, Sophie is the answerer. Whatcom Youth Pride also has a table out there. Whatcom Youth Pride hosts a parade and festival that's June 3rd. I'm actually part of the board, so if you have questions, you can always ask me about that. Anything on the table is free. And then PCO is a club here, Peer Centered Outreach. And Christina Campbell, who's way in the back, wave your hand, is the advisor for that club, but some of the students who are presenting at the end are part of that club. So if you have questions about that, they can answer those. I forgot to tell you, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm sure that as presenters come up, they will tell you their pronouns as well. Okay, I've been running around a lot since 3:30 at the end of the day. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Greg Thompson to share some information about the opioid fentanyl crisis. And then we have Steve Cohen, who's an EMS, Kim Niederhauser, who's our Director of Health Services, and Alyssa Johnson, who's a school nurse, are going to come up and talk about the Narcan training. So, here he is, Mr. Greg Thompson. Oh, yes. No, I think he used the side to side.
Can everyone hear me? So hi, I'm Greg Thompson. I'm co-health officer for Whatcom County, and because I share the job with Dr. Amy Harley, who wanted to be here tonight as well, but she's at maybe I should switch microphones. Do I have to keep this closed?
Yeah.
Can you hear me better now? Make other funny noises? No?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try and talk loud despite the microphone. Is that better?
Yes.
All right, so I'm Greg Thompson, co-health officer for Whatcom County, along with Dr. Amy Harley. She's not here tonight because she is at a Healthcare for the Homeless conference in Baltimore. And I'm going to be talking about the fentanyl crisis and young people. As health officer, my job is really to help keep the people of Whatcom County safe and healthy, so that's why I'm here. So really quickly, I just wanted to acknowledge we are going to talk about some serious subjects tonight, including deaths among teens and drug addiction. So if anyone's not comfortable with that, needs to take some time to step out. This first half of it, or this first portion, is going to be about 30 minutes, and then we'll move on to other subjects. I'm going to talk a little bit about the scope of what we're facing in Washington State and in Whatcom County particularly, give some general information about what fentanyl is, and then talk about ways to prevent drug poisonings or overdoses in youth. So to start with a little background, you may have heard the terms opiates or opioids, and what these are ultimately is drugs that are derived from the opium poppy. So we have been using these medications from this plant for about 5,000 years. We've got 5,000 years experience using them for medicines and 5,000 years of people developing addiction and dependence to these as well. The natural drugs are called opiates, and these include things like opium, morphine, heroin, and codeine. And more recently, we've developed synthetic ones that are made in a lab to either be more potent or have more specific effects. And you can see a few examples. People may have heard of OxyContin and fentanyl. So the way these drugs work is in our body, we have cells with little molecules on them that are called receptors. And when molecules attach to these receptors, they make a signal that tells our cells to do things. And in the case of the opioids, oops, you can see this little red opioid ball attaching to a receptor here. It signals things like pain relief, and that's the main reason that we use these, right? Opioid painkillers. They can also do things like decrease cough, if you're familiar with codeine. They can reduce diarrhea. If you're familiar with Imodium, that's actually an opioid, but it only functions peripherally. It doesn't really get into your central nervous system, so it's not easy to get high on Imodium. People have tried. And it causes euphoria, which is this feeling of intense pleasure, which is why people will sometimes get hooked on opioids to begin with. We use them for sedation. It makes you sleepy, so we use them for inducing anesthesia. And then finally, the thing that we worry about the most is they cause respiratory depression, so they can cause you to stop breathing if you take too much, and that's why people die from overdoses. When you use these drugs for a long time, they cause a number of effects. One is tolerance, which means the more you use them, the more you need to get the same effect. So if you're doing fine in terms of pain control with a 20 milligram dose, you may need 30 or 40 as time goes by to get the same effect. They also cause dependence, and what this means is over time your body requires these medications to continue to feel normal. So when you stop taking them, excuse me, you go through withdrawal, which is in the absence of these drugs, you suffer from anxiety, irritability, agitation. Those opioid effects get reversed, so instead of causing constipation, when you're going through withdrawal, you'll get diarrhea. And you can experience pain and severe intense cravings. And when this is bad, people can make bad decisions, and this can lead to overdoses. You can take too much, you can be unsafe when you're taking them. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the modern opioid epidemic that we're seeing now. And I say modern because I mentioned before we have 5,000 years experience with these drugs. And in the US, opioids have been a problem in different degrees since the founding of our country. But the modern opioid epidemic really began in the 1990s. You may be familiar with the prescription opioid crisis. Drugs like OxyContin were being marketed very, very aggressively for pain control as being a safe alternative that didn't cause dependence. That was 100% marketing. It wasn't true, as we learned fairly quickly. People developed dependence to these drugs, and you can see, this is Washington State drug deaths, by the way, due to opioids. And this green line here shows deaths related to prescription opioids increasing through the early 2000s. As we realized what a big problem this was, we passed new laws, we restricted the abilities of prescribers to prescribe too much, and you can see that those deaths plateaued and started going down around 2006.
But what happened is we had a lot of people who had developed a dependence on these medications. And so when they were no longer available, people switched to buying heroin off the street, and deaths from heroin started to rise. And that's what we consider wave 2 of our modern opioid epidemic. More recently, fentanyl has emerged on the scene, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. But in Washington State, beginning in about 2016, we really started seeing deaths from fentanyl increasing. And by 2019, they had bypassed or surpassed deaths due to heroin or deaths due to prescription opioids. And I will say Washington State, we're about 3 years behind the rest of the US. So these deaths started increasing on the East Coast and the Midwest about 3 years before they reached the West Coast. In Whatcom County specifically, you can see this is very solid data from 2018 to 2021 in terms of number of drug deaths annually. And this is any drug. So this could be alcohol, opioids, Tylenol overdoses. I don't think any of them are Tylenol overdoses, but most of them are opioids, and increasingly it was due to fentanyl. The more recent data comes from our medical examiner, and it's all very preliminary, so don't quote these numbers here. But in 2022, between 80 and 90 deaths, and in 2023, in the first fourth of this year, it's been about 30 deaths. So we're on par to exceed probably 100 deaths this year. And the majority of these, about 2/3 or more, are due to fentanyl. And what about the effects on young people? So people may have seen this graph last year talking specifically about the fact that in 2020, firearm-related injuries became the #1 cause of death in people between the ages of 1 and 19. And that was a new thing historically. Before, motor vehicle crashes had been the big cause. But the thing that wasn't really noticed as much is that drug overdoses jumped from about number 6 or 7 all the way up to number 3 cause of death in that same year. And this is kind of ironic in some ways, because as much as we always think things are getting worse, drug use in teens has actually been decreasing pretty steadily for the last 50 years. So you can see this is illicit drugs other than marijuana. And this is a survey all across the US of initially 12th graders, and then in 1991 they added 10th and 8th graders. But you can see in the early 80s, as many as over 20% of kids reported using an illicit drug in the last 30 days. And that number is down now to about 4 or 5% nationwide. And we see that universally. We see the same thing in Whatcom County. But drug deaths are increasing despite this decreased use. And why is that? And this is your answer. This gray line here is fentanyl deaths. So all these other lines are deaths in youth between the ages of 14 and 18 due to various different drugs, benzodiazepines, methamphetamine, cocaine, the prescription opioids, and heroin. All of those are basically flat, but fentanyl is increasing dramatically. So the arrival of fentanyl on the scene is what is causing this big upsurge in drug deaths in young people. And what is it that makes fentanyl so bad? Number one, it's extremely potent. So it's 50 times stronger than heroin. For people selling drugs, that's nice because they can transport very, very small quantities to get the same effect, and they can make a lot more money. This 2 milligrams here, that's 1/500th of a gram, and a gram is about the size of a paper clip. So if you broke a paper clip up into 500 pieces, that's the weight of pure fentanyl that could kill someone. And that's about 40 times the dose that I would give someone, an adult, in the emergency room if I was giving fentanyl for pain control. That 2 milligram dose, that lethal dose, is present in about half of these fake fentanyl pills that are sold on the street, and we'll talk about that a little more here. The fentanyl is really cheap right now. It's being mass-produced in huge factories that are run by drug cartels and imported into the US and sold very, very inexpensively. Fentanyl is probably worse too because it's more attractive than some of the older alternatives. If anyone has seen what black tar heroin looks like, it's this gross peanut buttery brown substance that you heat up and you inject into your veins. And the fentanyl that people are using looks like pharmaceutical pills. It's usually crushed and smoked. And you can take it in different ways as well, but that's the most common way that it's taken. And it's being marketed to look like pills because people trust pills more than they trust these other forms of drugs. So this is fake oxycodone, or sorry, this is real pharmaceutical oxycodone, and this is fake oxycodone made of fentanyl. That's a real Xanax, and there's fake Xanax made of fentanyl. There is a real Adderall used for ADHD treatment, and this is fake Adderall made of fentanyl. And so these two drugs have nothing to do with opioids, but By putting these in these pills and selling them on the street, people can make money. It's also being mixed as an additive with other drugs, everything from cocaine, less commonly marijuana, but we see that as well, and being mixed with other drugs to increase people's desire to buy those other drugs because it's so addictive. Now, when young people are dying, when we think about what we can do to prevent these deaths, it's important to understand the circumstances. About 60% of the time, these deaths are happening at home. About 84% of the time, they involve fentanyl. In contrast to adults, only about 1/3 of young people who are dying of fentanyl have a known history of opioid use. And I say in contrast to adults because most of the adults who are dying of overdoses are people who have a long history of using opioids. But in young people, sometimes it's experimentation. And we talked about how dangerous these pills can be because the doses are so high. If you're someone who's using them chronically, your body has developed that tolerance to it. If you're someone who's experimenting and using it for the first time, it can be a fatal dose. Let's see, and 2/3 of the time, there's a potential bystander present. So either someone in the next room, someone in that room with you, and in 2/3 of these cases, the bystander didn't respond. So a big part of what we're trying to do with the young people, number one, is to prevent this youth in the first, or use, sorry, prevent the youth from using in the first place, and understanding the risks, but also making sure that if people are using, that there are opportunities for those bystanders to intervene. And we'll be talking about naloxone, the antidote, in a moment here. So this is an example. Steve from EMS is going to be talking about this, but very quickly, Narcan or naloxone is this little green ball here, and it basically pushes the opioids off the receptors and blocks the receptors so it can take you out of that overdose situation and save a life if it's used in the right way. I want to point out though, naloxone, Narcan, it's extremely, extremely important as a tool, but it's like a fire extinguisher. We wouldn't say that our fire control policy in the US is just to give everyone fire extinguishers, right? It's an important tool if you use it at the right time and know how to use it. But we also have fire safety engineering, we hire fire departments of trained experts. There are a lot of things that we do in designing products to make them safe. And our approach to drug overdose deaths has to be the same. And that really begins with prevention, goes through these interventions like Narcan into treatment and aftercare, and really building a whole infrastructure to take care of people. And a big part of this is community as well, which kind of I didn't speak about here, but having community is an important part of preventing addiction and preventing death. So a few things that we can do. Number one is deferring the start of using alcohol, vaping, and marijuana. We know all of these things prime the same addiction pathways that are used in opioid addiction. And we know that even postponing the start of using these substances by just a few years can dramatically decrease the lifetime risk of developing an opioid use disorder. When we educate our young people, it's important to be fact-based. I mean, these things are scary, but using fear to educate people does not work on young people. We learned that in the 80s when we had some fear-based drug prevention campaigns, and they backfired. So teaching people the facts and helping them make good decisions is important. Peer support, hugely important. And it's also important to educate parents. You know, at home, if you have unused medications and drugs, they should be locked up or they should be returned if you don't need them. If you have a surgery and they give you a bunch of opioids to take as painkillers, once you're done and you've recovered, get rid of those medications. Modeling behavior is really important for parents as well. If you, at the end of a hard day, you say, wow, it's been a really tough day, I need a drink. Think about the message that gives kids about the role of substances in dealing with stress. And also understanding how important parents and trusted adults are in resiliency among teens. And I never want a parent to ever feel that if their child is using drugs that it means that they're a bad parent. But the more close relationships that kids do have with their parents, the more that helps protect against drug use in the future. And a lot we can do societally to improve our mental health supports. School-based health clinics have been shown to be beneficial. And just to learn more about this, you can also look at whatcomehope.org. It's a local website that has links to resources as well as some YouTube videos that talk about some of this prevention. Now I'm going to hand it off to Steve to talk about how to use Narcan to save lives.
If you click it one slide ahead, you'll see that QR code.
Oh.
There you go.
QR code.
So if you have a question, now's a great time to write it down or send it in. Otherwise, carry on.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
What? One thing you learn in EMS is to talk loud and not use a microphone. Well, my name is Steve Cohen. I'm the EMS training specialist for Whatcom County, and my job is to educate and train our EMTs and paramedics in all kinds of emergencies, as well as keep their continuing education. One thing we have done over the last year and a half or so is we've branched out to the community and teaching all kinds of different courses, including something I'll talk about in a few minutes about our Leave Narcan Behind program. So I'm very easily accessible. You'll see my contact information at the end. So let's talk about some Narcan, and I want to give you a little bit of an overview before I get into the demonstration, because I'm going to give you an opportunity to stand up and watch me go through the demonstration. We'll go on the floor here, and you can stand up and take a look at what I'm going to do. But first of all, let's talk about, we're looking at the data, right? And we started back in June, and let's see if I can figure out this line here, the blue line going up and down, is our Narcan use in the EMS system as of today, this number here. And we're about 57% of this. The blue bar, and I think they're blue, will tell you the suspected opioid overdose, and the orange is all other overdoses. For example, yesterday we responded to 7 overdoses in the system. Out of those 7, 3 of those calls had Narcan use, and they were all used appropriately because those 3 people that got Narcan were unconscious, they were unresponsive, sorry about that, and they weren't breathing. And out of those 3, nobody in the house or nobody where it was had Narcan with them. So when our units got on the scene, they provided the Narcan. Guess what? What we said earlier, it blocks that receptor, returns people to breathing. So that's what Narcan did. And we did that for all 3 of those patients yesterday. The other patients had, there was alcohol overdose, there was a Tylenol overdose, and there was an unknown substance overdose. I'll just give you some idea of what's going on here. Now this is not a really good slide, but we took a look at overdoses by age, and we're talking about youth here. And as you see, those numbers are relatively low, and this is 18 right there. But look at that spike at age 30. Interesting. I thought it was interesting. So we're seeing a lot of 30-year-olds overdosing and in our system. And then a little bit in the elderly, because sometimes they get pain medicine, because one of the biggest calls that we respond to are ground level falls. And when they go to the hospital, and they get released from the hospital, they have pain medicine that are given to them. So, but this was kind of interesting. But as we talk about, at least in our EMS system today, the numbers are really low for 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds, which I think is good. So somebody's doing something right and doing some education. This is, I just thought, an interesting slide as well. This is from 21 to 23 today. The females, there's about 532 patients that were female, and then 903 males since 2021 that overdosed in our system. Now, which I didn't get to put the slide in, what we're seeing over in 2023, it's kind of shifted. We're seeing more females that are overdosing than males. Don't know what the switch is, but in 2023 so far, we're seeing more females that are overdosing.
I had a question. When you say overdose, you don't mean death, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Right. We're looking at deaths too, but that's not.
Yeah.
Right now, these are all people that have either survived or came in as an overdose or were actually an overdose. And that first slide showed the suspected opioid versus other. Yeah, good question. And this is what we just talked about, some age as well going on from 2022. Again, the age group here of 30 to 39. And then down here, we talk about our youth, not too bad, male and female. But you can see that females are going to take the lead pretty soon. So I don't want, some of my slides kind of went in there, but we talked about this with Dr. Thompson, and so we'll just go through that. So let's talk about Narcan and what we do with it. And I'm going to pass around a trainer, though unfortunately the plunger would be out, but a lot of people when they practice, they lock the plunger in there. So we'll pass that around and take a look at that. So how do you administer Narcan? And what we do if you had Narcan on you, right? So if you want to stand up.
Actually, could you put it right here on the table?
Right here?
Yeah, it might be easier for folks.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So the first thing we're going to do, let's just say I'm on my EMS unit and I'm not in uniform, but I carry Narcan in my backpack. So I'm going down the street. And I say, oh my God, there's a person down. They're unresponsive, I think, but I can shout from here and say, hey, are you okay, to see if they wake up. But even before I approach them, I do a 360. And I look here, I look here, I look here, I look over here to make sure that I'm safe, because I don't know what's lurking behind the patient. Or I don't know if somebody's standing over there, maybe over here somebody has a knife or a gun, or maybe it's a family member who doesn't want me to come near that person. So you want to make sure that you are safe. The other thing we ask you to do is be calm, take a deep breath while you're doing that 360 safety look, because in the end, even when we're on the ambulance or on the fire truck, we want to go home safe at the end of our shift. Same thing when we go approach a patient out in the field or out that we're not in uniform. So the scene is safe. I come across, and what I do is I take the person's, my hand, and I put on their arm. And what I do is I go, hey, are you okay? Now if I'm by myself, I'm picking up my cell phone and I'm calling 911 and putting it on speakerphone. And say, hey, I'm at the corner of walk and don't walk. I have somebody's unconscious, possible overdose, whatever it may be. And the reason why I do that, again, safety component, because if they're just sleeping and I wake them up and I just do this, you don't know if they're going to come up and swing and hit you. So this way, if you feel them tensing up, you can back up, and that's always a good thing. Then what I want to do is I'm going to look and see if they're breathing or moving, and they're not moving. When we talk about when do we give Narcan, is when you look at somebody that's unconscious, but then take a look at their chest, right? Right now, your chest is breathing, going up and down normally. Somebody that has an overdose of fentanyl, the receptors hit the brain stem and say, you know, I'm going to stop you from breathing, or I'm going to slow down your breathing. And so everybody go ahead and take a deep breath for me. All right, take another one. So what you're going to look for is that chest going up and down normally, like we're doing right now. But there might be no breathing. And then we're concerned that this is a possible overdose. They're not breathing, or they're doing what we call snoring respiration. Snoring respirations look like this. That's snoring respirations. Does that sound normal? It does not. It's irregular, it's weird. Right. So if you see something that's weird, their chest is not going up and down, then we're going to move forward to Narcan. We go ahead and tilt the head back just a little bit, because if the head's tilted back, we give the Narcan, it's just going to sit right up here in the nasal area. We want to make sure that the airway's open, the passages are open. We tilt the head back, and can somebody throw me one of the, I should have brought the third one.
Here you go.
Thank you. So get the Narcan out, tilt the head back. One finger here. Oh, somebody gave me another trainer, thank you. All right, there's a plunger on this one. Put it in the nose, and I push the plunger. And that's all there is to it. Now, what you want to do, how many people use nasal spray? Right? What do you do to try to get it moving first? You prime it. You can't prime this Narcan nasal administration. Because if I push this button right now, before I put it into the patient, you expelled the medication. Do that. Give the medicine. A couple things you can do here now. One is you can see if it works, or what we're trying to tell people is you can go to hands-only CPR. And how we do hands-only CPR, middle of the chest for an adult, heel of one hand in the middle of the chest, one hand on the other side, and you just start compressing about 1.5 to 2 inches down, and you can just do that until fire department gets there and EMS gets there, and they can take over for you. Now you're saying, well, now it's taking 7-10 minutes, they're not here. What are we gonna do? I got a second, maybe I have a second dose of Narcan. You can go ahead and do the same thing, give the Narcan, and go back to doing hands-only CPR. Now, the question might come up and say, well, should I breathe for them? Well, there's some debate about if you should breathe or not. Most people in the public probably don't want to breathe for somebody or put their mouth on somebody's mouth. But if you have a Berry device, yes, you can start breathing for them. And that's a totally different course. But we're teaching hands-only CPR. Whereas if I go down right now, I have about 4 to 6 minutes of reserve oxygen in me. So you just do compressions, you're getting that oxygenated blood to the right places for me. We'll get here, and we'll take over for you. It's a very simple thing. Last but not least, boom, boom. Summary, you want to assess your safety, make sure your safety, you assess the patient, call 911, administer Narcan, start some CPR.
I had another question. How long between the first and second?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that quite often.
What was the question?
So what you're trying to do is you want to give enough Narcan, at least the initial dose, to hopefully get that weird breathing to being normal like we're breathing today. Right? We don't have to wake the person up. So 1 to 2 to 3 minutes could be good. Some people wait 1 minute. Some people just start giving the second one right off the bat. They don't give an opportunity for the Narcan to circulate. So you can wait 1 to 2 minutes and see if there's any change. But again, you don't have to wake them up. But if you do wake them up or they start to breathe normally, what you want to do is go ahead and turn them on their side, because they will more than likely probably vomit. And you rather than vomit that way than versus on you. And the other part is this way you can watch and if there's any change. So this is my contact information, but we'll get to that. That's my dog Bailey. She is 2 years old, born on my birthday. We have a program called Leave Narcan Behind, and it was started by my boss, Mike Hilley, and then as soon as I got here, it became my project. And we've given out close to 800, and we're probably up to 875 doses of Narcan in 14 months. That's a lot of Narcan. But that's good, because we've put it in places in Whatcom County, in government and public facing. We put it in restaurants. We put it in marijuana shops. We've put it to people at their own personal use. Or not personal use, but, well, some for personal use, but some that they feel they want to get involved if somebody goes down and needs some Narcan. So we've given it all over the place. We've expanded it to do that, because initially the project was for just high-risk patients. We don't know who's high risk. And the other component too is that not every patient that's unconscious needs Narcan. So if you have somebody that's unconscious and they're breathing normally, they're not going to need Narcan. So just remember that weird breathing. If they're weird breathing or no breathing at all, they probably could use a little bit of Narcan. Doesn't mean they're going to wake up, but at least you've made an attempt to do that. But our Leave Narcan Home, you just email me if you want Narcan for your backpacks or for somebody that you know or somebody just to have. Just email me. Our Narcan is, we do a little bit of training just like something like today. We'll give you some Narcan and you're off to the races. Yesterday I trained one person. He's a new dad, and he was a little bit nervous about everything, and he said all the things in the news and the media, he said, hey, can I have some Narcan? He just knocked on our door in our office and said, sure. We gave him some Narcan, gave him some education. He asked tons of questions, and he felt more comfortable when he left. So Narcan's readily available right now through us, as well as I think the health department has some too. And so that would be back there with Lila, right? I could see Lila, yeah. And so this is, well, I guess if you get any other questions, whatever it may be.
Hey,
I'll
what's
be
the
here.
average response time if you call 911 if you're in the city of Bellingham?
Average response time, I don't know the Well, thank you. I don't know the exact amount, but if in the city of Bellingham, you can figure you can have a fire truck on the scene probably between 3 and 5 minutes, depending on where the call is. But if you're out in the county, it could be 15 to 20 minutes before a unit gets there. We have 5 paramedic units for the whole county, and we're surrounded by 13 BLS units. And some of our BLS units carry the nasal Narcan, which our medical director says, yep, you can go ahead and give that, which actually happened on one of those calls yesterday. They were on the scene first, the medic unit was on the way, they recognized it was an overdose, they gave some Narcan, they gave a second Narcan a few minutes later, and the patient was breathing by the time the medic unit got there.
And what is the likelihood of them going into withdrawals once you knock the opiates off the receptors? Like, what's the time?
I'll let the doctor answer that.
Causes withdrawal,
Yeah.
yeah. If you've only used it once, like this is your first time using, you won't go into withdrawal because you haven't developed dependence. You will immediately come off of the high. If you have been taking opioids for a while, then your body has developed that dependence, and then you will go into withdrawal.
Pretty
So,
quickly.
Oh, it's
yes,
So it could be pretty angry.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pause there, so if you have questions about either the information that Dr. Thompson gave us or Steve just gave you, now is a great time to drop your question in the list so that we can make sure that we get those questions answered. When you head out at the end, there is some Narcan that's available on the table to take with you. I want to just make sure I hand the mic to you, Kim and Alyssa, before we.
Right. Oh, I can speak loudly. Yeah. So I'm Kim Niederhauser, Director of Health Services for Bellingham Public Schools. I've been here a couple of years now and came from the health department. So as far as Narcan, a law was passed, and starting last school year, districts with over 2,000 students need to have Narcan available in their high schools, at least with the school nurse RN being able to administer. And if the RN isn't there at all times, then at least 1 to 2 other people should be trained. That if you could obtain the Narcan through community organization donation, the drug company gives like 1 freebie a year, actually ever, 1 at all time. And then if you, good faith effort, couldn't get it, that would be okay. Okay, well that didn't fly with us. We wanted to do a lot more and a lot better. So last year we got it in place in our high schools. We got a solid core group of staff trained, whether that's campus monitors, administrators, health services assistants, counselors, yeah. Intervention specialists, yeah, okay. Like, big teams, right? And then more people wanted to be on the team. And then just with the increasing concern in the community and hitting just, right here in Whatcom County, it was like, okay, we gotta do more, let's get it into our middle schools. And so we were able to purchase it. Schools don't have the same, you can't just go get the free as you can as an individual. So we purchased Narcan, and we also just went ahead and purchased it for all of our elementary schools as well. So we have some more work to do to get more people up and trained, but we at least have Narcan on site and some core staff on site to be able to administer that. And in the school setting, we have, so Steve presented a good community approach to the training. We have some nuance in school because we need to follow the OSPI, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction's training guide. And in there, they tell us to follow the Department of Health's training guide. So we might be a little quicker to give it, like if it's under 8 breaths per minute and they're not responsive, and we're seeing those other signs of color, pale, and the gurgling, the other sounds, like we're gonna go ahead and suspect overdose and give that. And then on that Department of Health, it instructs us that if they don't come to in 3 minutes, well, we're administering CPR, and then we're also gonna give it again in the other nostril in 3 minutes. So that's our protocol here, as well as always calling 911. So we're also just banking on the 911's there to take over for us. Our nurses have all stepped up and have been doing trainings on the fly, and then we'll look at some ways to get more people trained, because a lot of our teachers are coming forward with, I really want to be ready to help. I'll let you.
Yeah.
My name is Alyssa Johnson, and I'm one of the school nurses. I work here at Seahome, I'm at Lowell, I work at Wade King, and I have the Bellingham Family Partnership Program. Amy Eisenhower is here in the audience, and she's another one of our school nurses at Geneva, Carl Kosher, and Colshan. So, I mean, we're here as resources for students that might have an overdose at school, but we also are here for resources for many different things. And I really just wanted to introduce myself as one of the school nurses. And also mention, if you were at our last community academy, Christina Campbell, our wonderful community intervention specialist, and her students talked also about harm reduction. So prevention is super important, but we also talk about harm reduction, and Narcan is one of the things that is very important for harm reduction because we know that people like to experiment with different things. So that would be another piece just to keep in mind too. Prevention is super important, but also we want to prevent bad outcomes. So I really don't have much more to add. I really appreciate all training information that you gave, Steve, and we are willing and able to train really whoever wants to be trained in our community. So thank you all for being here. This is a really great group. I see many friends here, so this is lovely.
I also want to add that the law does allow students to self-carry, and then we encourage them to, part of that law is then checking in with the school nurse and making sure they know how to use it, when to use it, and connecting them to other supports in school. So, but we don't want to create any barriers to anyone saving a life.
Thank you. Can I give an applause for all of our presenters? It is my pleasure to introduce Paige to you now. Paige is the founder of the Common Goodness Project, which I'm sure you'll hear more about, and has a unique role in our community around supporting LGBTQ youth. So, Paige.
Thanks. I did not send this photo. You must have lifted this from something. Yeah. So it's fantastic to be here. I also see a lot of friendly faces. I just came off the opportunity to work with Kim and Amelia back there on the school-based health center assessment and options. So prevention and school-based health centers as being critical in interrupting those cycles of addiction in young people. I'm excited that we get to look at that opportunity here too. So I've been part of the LGBTQ social justice movement since about 2004. Over the last decade or so, I've developed an expertise in serving youth. I worked at Northwest Youth Services, running the Queer Youth Project for a number of years, and now I've started my own business, working with the trusted adults that are already in place in the lives of LGBTQ young people, and giving them sort of the information, the support, the confidence that they need to step into the role of supporting those young people. It's really fortuitous that we get to work together. Thank you, Bethany, for setting this up. Because LGBTQ youth use more than their straight, non-transgender friends. They use drugs and alcohol more. When you are having a hard time in life, right? When maybe you're experiencing rejection, and life at home is hard, and life at school is hard, and you hear powerful people in your country, sort of undermining your sense of worth and dignity, and you turn to substances, what do we call that? Self-medicating, right? Coping. These young people are oftentimes using drugs and alcohol to sort of soothe the pain that they're feeling. Now, let's see here, what do we got? Oh yeah, that's me, okay. I want to preface stepping into the next conversation just by saying hey, look here, we are all people who love our kids and want them to thrive. And so even if we come from different political or religious or just community paradigms on what it means to be LGBTQ, we all share this common ground, right? And we all are aiming at these same things, young people who can thrive, right? And questions about gender identity and sexual orientation are new for a lot of us. And we want to know how to help our kids. So I don't know about you, but when I graduated high school in 1996, gender identity wasn't a concept I had any language for, right? And how many of us before the last few years really even thought about our pronouns? Okay, the young people raised their hands. So don't LGBTQ youth have a more difficult time in life, right? I was just talking about how they use more. Sometimes, yes. But struggle for LGBTQ youth isn't inevitable. It's not part and parcel of their identity. It's the social context within which they live. We have Healthy Youth Survey data that comes out every 2 years that tells us how our 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders are doing right here in Whatcom County. And year after year after year, it's clear that they're experiencing humiliation and harassment at home more, right? They're experiencing rejection at home more, and they're experiencing bullying at school more. They're less likely to feel safe at school. These trends are continuing, right? And they're not gonna fix themselves. We have to help change the context of lives for LGBTQ youth. We're the adults, most of us here, with the power to shift some of these dynamics that are so critical for LGBTQ youth. And the awesome thing is, we know what makes life harder, right, and leads to poor long-term outcomes, and we know what makes life better right now and leads to much better long-term outcomes. Because we have the Family Acceptance Project. The Family Acceptance Project is a longitudinal study that's been going on for many years, and what they did was they started interviewing LGBTQ youth way back when, and they asked them, what is happening in your home? What are your parents saying to you? What are the behaviors that are happening between you and your parents or your guardians, right? And now they've tracked them into adulthood so they can see how is this person mentally, physically, socially, hope-wise, right, etc. And the Family Acceptance Project developed 2 lists. One of parent or guardian behaviors that make life worse for young people right now and are proven to lead to poorer mental and physical health in the long run. And, this is the good part, a list of parent or guardian behaviors that make life better now and are proven to lead to better long-term mental health and physical outcome. So sometimes when we think about young people who are having a hard time, it can be so easy to be like, I'm totally overwhelmed, things keep going in the wrong direction, and I don't know what to do. Well, now we know what to do. Okay, so what makes life harder? Not believing your child, or telling them just a phase. How might this sound?
Dismissive.
It's dismissive, right? It's a fad, peer pressure. You're too young. You're too young to know. You're too young to know, right? But actually, gender identity develops about this big. Knee high, like 3 or 4. They may not understand the difference between who they know themselves to be and what the world thinks of them, but that's when it starts to develop. And then sexual orientation, right at the beginning of puberty. But now we have 3rd graders who are asking questions about their sexual orientation. Why might a 3rd grader be asking a question of who am I in relationship to others? Why might they be asking that? What's that?
Siblings.
Siblings, sure.
Peers.
Right? Peers.
The school teaches it.
The school teaches it. There's a book right here in the children's book section. Tango Makes 3, right? This is a true story about 2 penguins in the Central Park Zoo who were male, and the zookeeper gave them an egg, and they hatched it, and they raised that child. Children are exposed to more diversity of families. So they can look at a family like mine, with me and my wife and our 2 little kids, and say, I wonder if I'm going to have that kind of family when I'm older. In the same way that we've been comfortable with little girls thinking, I wonder if I'm going to grow up and marry a prince, right? It only makes us uncomfortable. We only question it. We only doubt the child when it makes us uncomfortable, right? When it sort of trips us up in terms of what we imagine our child's life to look like. Okay, separating a child from their supportive peers. Child comes out. Parents say, oh, it's your friend's fault. I'm going to take away your phone and social media. That's dangerous, right? Those friends, that social media connection, might be a real lifeline to acceptance, right? And apart from that, we might have some real concern in terms of depression, anxiety, and suicidality or running away, right? I've also seen this happen where a young person will have some supportive family members, an aunt and an uncle, right? And then suddenly they're cut off from them. Attempts to change their identity. I think this goes without saying, right? But let's talk about how it can be kind of subtle. So pressuring them to be more masculine or feminine. How could this sound? Like, what's an example of a way that this could come up? Clothing. Hey, you look so beautiful with your hair down. Gosh, you really looked beautiful in that dress, right? Or, oh, you look really handsome when you dress up and you wear a tie. Or just, I'm going to give you a lot more positive attention when you're doing the kinds of things I want you to do, and I'm going to ignore you when you don't do the things I want you to do, right? Not protecting them from bullying or hurtful behaviors, or worse yet, like blaming them for bullying or hurtful behaviors. Well, if you hadn't come out, if you hadn't chosen to be this way, right? And then asking a child to hide who they are. This comes up, I see, a lot in the context of family relationships, like relatives. So it's really important that, hey, we're gonna go see grandma in 2 weeks or next month or whatever it is. Let's talk in advance about how we want this to go. Because we don't know how grandma's gonna react, or maybe we do know how grandma's gonna react, right? And you can have a prep conversation with your young person so that you can get onto the same page about how everybody's gonna feel about it. You can talk about your concerns. So my fear is that grandma will say or do this. And then that will hurt so bad. So would you rather, like, what feels better to you? Like, to risk that or to stay in the closet? All right, so that's the list of some of the things that the Family Acceptance Project has found contributes to more harms. There's a longer list, and I can help you find that if you email me. Okay. It's frozen. Did I touch it?
Kim Kirk, what do I push down here to unfreeze it?
Do you have a remote?
Yeah?
Push the
Hit
freeze
the
button.
freeze button. Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
My reader's on.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Jumped ahead here. So, what makes life better? Talk with your kid about their identity. Believe what they tell you. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to have no idea what those words mean. If you want to talk to your young person about what those words mean, sit and listen with a posture of learning and humility. Like, hey, this is all brand new to me. I need you to help me understand this, because this is a totally different language or a totally different world or a totally different way of understanding gender than I'm used to. There are also many very good online resources to break down language. Okay. Express love and affection when they share with you who they are, right? Like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for trusting me with this. I can tell that this was hard to tell me, right? I want you to know I love you. And I often hear parents or guardians will say, I don't care how they identify. I said, don't say that, actually. I care how they identify because I know it's important to them, but I don't have a preference about how they identify. If we say we don't care, it can also feel dismissive. Does that make sense? Okay. So maybe a hug, maybe even a note, maybe some flowers. You know your kid, right? What's gonna feel meaningful to them as recognition that they have come to some understanding about who they are and shared that with you. I wouldn't go all out with a party unless that was something they asked for. And the reason I say that is because if we give them a whole bunch of positive regard for one thing, right? And then adolescents doing what they do, continuing to do that process of self-discovery, and like next week, next month, next year, they're like, actually, I don't know if that old thing fits anymore. I kind of feel like I may be in a new space. That's awesome. But if we gave them all this positive regard for last year's identity, they might be hesitant to tell us about that shift, right? Does anybody have a young person in their life who's got this like ongoing, changing self-discovery process? All right, I see some hands. And you know, this could be about sexual orientation or gender identity, or it could be about the kind of art they want to do, or music they want to listen to, or shoes they want to wear, or friends they're going to keep, right? That's the journey of an adolescent. And back in my day, we didn't get to ask questions about sexual orientation and gender identity. And it's a huge opportunity for health and well-being that young people today get to do that. While I'm on the subject, does everybody know what a digital native is? What's a digital native? Who wants to share? You're nodding your head. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Someone that was born in the age of the internet.
Yeah, someone who was born in the age of the internet, right? So I have a daughter who's almost 4, and we recently went on a vacation and we got her a tablet. I can't figure the thing out, but she's not even 4 years old and she's lightning fast with the thing, right? She's a digital native. It comes natural to her. I think about young people right now, high school, early college age right now, as gender natives. They're doing something new. They're exploring, understanding, using, seeing, interpreting gender in ways that even I don't get, and I study them, right? So I think that it's worthwhile to just note that the world they're living in regards to gender is not the world we're living in as adults. All right, understand that as they grow, their identity to shift. That does not mean it's invalid. If they tell you they're bisexual today, they are bisexual today. And if next week they're gay or lesbian or pan, it doesn't mean they weren't bisexual last week. Because if that's how they felt, that's what was true, right? It's helpful to say like, hey, look, I'm a lot older than you and I'm still figuring myself out, right? This is healthy, this is natural. Thanks for continuing to share it with me. Allow your child to express their gender in ways that they're comfortable with. Clothes, hair, name, etc. All right. Did I do it again?
No, you're good, you're good.
On this topic of names and pronouns, I want to mention to you a study. Because I think it's so easy to dismiss this name and pronoun thing, especially when we've invested in the name of our child, right? I know the process that my wife and I went through in naming our kids and how their names land in my ears, right? And like the way it registers in my heart too, yeah. So the University of Texas at Austin did this study with transgender teenagers, and they asked them in 4 areas of your life, work, home, school, and friends, where do people consistently use your affirming name, right? And with trans and non-binary kids, I really see name and pronoun having the same emotional resonance. What they found was that for youth who could use it in all 4 areas of their life, they experienced a 71% decrease in severe depression. That's huge, especially for kids who are more likely to be depressed in a context where a lot of young people are depressed, right? In a time where a lot of young people are depressed. What can you do when you're no longer severely depressed that you couldn't do before? Get out of bed, work, learn,
Plan ahead.
Process.
be happy, turn in an assignment, make friends, try out for a play, participate in a club, right? So many things. That's a huge quality of life and also an opportunity to actually develop. I'm thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? If they don't have those fundamental pieces intact, they can't do some of those higher order pieces of really developing into an adult. And get this, they also found that if they could use their name in all 4 areas of life, 65% decrease in suicide attempts. That's huge. And we just acknowledged that before, like 3 or 5 years ago.
So I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
So you said that you really you took a lot of time, you and your wife, with, choosing the names of your children.
Yeah.
So do you expect that your children will probably come to an age maybe around, 6th grade or so, well, they'll decide that name doesn't resonate with them and that they want a different name?
They could. I don't know for
So
sure.
names should also be fluid?
Names may very well be fluid.
Okay. So parents probably shouldn't really name their children anymore?
I mean, you sounded like you had a huge
Yeah.
heart and you really cared about
Totally.
naming your child.
Yeah.
That you put a lot of thought
Yeah, I did.
effort into it?
I think we should definitely name our kids, right? Get them sort of kicked off into the world
Okay.
with a
But
sense
just
of who
not
they
have
are.
any attachment to it.
I mean, so I think we can totally have attachment to it, right? And what I see when I work with the parents or caregivers of LGBTQ plus youth is they have their own emotional process when their kiddo comes out. A parent, from the time that a child is understood to exist, right? We start to imagine who this child will become, right? What will we name them? What will they wear? Who will they be? What will their personalities be like? And I told you, my kids are little. I'm already dreaming of grandkids, right? That is natural, that is healthy, that is good. And when I saw their genitals on a sonogram and came to those conclusions, it was before they told me anything about who they are, right? It was before they had any input
Okay.
and me conjuring up an
So
idea who they
all
become.
of that gets ripped away and everything's fine.
No, not at all. So this is such an important
And
conversation,
it also sounds like
and I'm really glad.
being, as far as being, basically having sex with anybody is okay too. It sounds
Okay,
like that's
so-
also being promoted.
Oh, I'm so glad you're bringing that up. So let me make 2 quick points and then I'd like to carry on. So the first is, no, it doesn't get ripped away and it's fine. Things change. Our expectations change, right? Our expectations of what our child's life might look like change. And if you asked my mom, the year I came out, how she felt about it, she would describe it in terms of grief. But if you asked her how she'd feel about it today, she would say joy, pride, right? Was it difficult for her to get from there to here? At times, but she got there. The second piece is, and I want you to hear this, that we're not talking about sexual ethics. We are talking about the adolescent search for self. We are talking about a child asking, who am I? Who am I on the inside as a gender? Who am I on the inside as a person who's going to be in a relationship to others? Are we talking about sex at all when we're talking about gender identity? No. Gender identity has nothing to do with sexual activity. Are we talking about sex when we're talking about children or youth and sexual orientation? No. We are talking about relationship. We are talking about that fundamental question, who am I on the inside? Sexual activity is a whole separate question. And if we overlook a child who's exploring, who am I on the inside? And we say, you can't be that. That's not acceptable, right? What's the message we're sending to them? They're not okay. They're broken. I won't love you for who you truly are.
And they're not going to tell you.
And they're not going to trust us with the rest of their story. That's right. So when we use a young person's affirming name and pronoun, as uncomfortable as it may be for us as the adult, what's the message we are sending them? We love you. We love you. We trust you. We take you seriously when you tell us who you are. I'm going to be here for you no matter who you are. Right? All right. I think there's one more, maybe two more pieces. So don't allow your child to be bullied by other kids or mistreated by adults because of their LGBTQ identity. It's never okay to bully a child, right? I don't care how much we disagree with them, how much they insult us. I have a preschooler. I get insulted like several times an hour, right? But I recognize that it is not her job to take care of me. It's my job to take care of her. And the last thing is, use your child's chosen name and pronoun. I know I just mentioned the study, but I cannot say this enough. If there is one thing that comes up over and over and over and over in the research that's supportive and important in terms of creating an environment where a young person is going to be physically, psychologically, spiritually safe, it's this. Use your child's affirming name and pronoun. Because the risks of not doing this, the risks of not supporting your young person who's exploring these questions of who they are is poor mental health, right? Substance use, and potentially alienation from youth, right? And that's the last thing we want as parents and caregivers for young people. All right, so to that end, I was gifted a really fantastic grant to put on some free caregiver training. So if you or someone you know would benefit from a 2-day caregiver training, I hope you'll reach out. So I have a website, registration information is there. Again, it's free, but you do need to register. And I'm gonna protect this space because I want people to be able to learn and experience support there. All questions are welcome, but it will be starting with the fundamental premise that LGBTQ identities are worthy of acceptance and love. So, so those are the dates, and then this is my email address. And I did not expect this many people. So I have something like 16 flyers. But here they are. I'll actually probably put them out in the hallway so you can grab them on your way out. But I'd be really happy to speak with anyone about their questions or concerns, and I hope you've got some questions for me later. Yeah?
Do you know any resources for like peer mentors for the LGBT community?
That's great, and it's a missing resource. We don't really have that. I think we could do a lot more to bolster the effectiveness of our QSAs by providing them with some leadership training. But that's not something that's happening right now, so I know. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank thank you, Paige. The work that Paige has done in our community and with the future health center at Options High School will pay off for many, many years. So, if you have questions, now is a great time to drop them in the QR code list. So, get your phone queued up for your next question. I think once you have it once, you can just keep asking questions. Okay. I didn't even know the order of these sessions would be so great. To start off with sort of like an overview of what's going on in our community around substance use, to how it looks to support youth who, as those of us who work in education know, that youth who identify outside of the binary, outside of the straight context is huge. So when we talk about supporting LGBTQ youth, we're talking about supporting all of our youth and their friends and their families. So thank you for that. And now, if you wanted to know more about how to be a trusted adult, which are a lot of the topics that were touched on in both the previous sessions, I would like to invite Emma Esquivel and Iris Walker and Sierra Haas, it looks. Sorry, Sierra, I don't have your name up here, but
Okay.
we have,
Yay.
even more. Let's welcome them up. So these 4 lovely students are going to share with you their names, I'm assuming their pronouns as well, and then they're going to walk you through the next workshop. So thank you for your attention, and please, if you need to get something, just feel free to get up and go take care of yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma Esquivel. I use any pronouns.
Hi, my name is Sierra Haas. I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, my name is Iris Walker, and I also use she, her pronouns.
Hi, I'm Addie McAllister, and I use she, her pronouns.
Okay, so we're going to start with some definitions. So mental health is the general health and well-being of the mind, and it's different from mental illness. Mental illness is something that disrupts the mental state and how one thinks, communicates, or behaves.
So this is an example of a mental illness, depression, which is a mental condition characterized by feelings of severe despondency and dejection, typically also with feelings of inadequacy and guilt, often accompanied by a lack of energy and disturbance of appetite and sleep.
So now I'm going to talk about trauma versus PTSD. So trauma can happen to anyone. It can happen after a distressing event. This can be any event. PTSD is a diagnosis that comes with many different severe symptoms, and everyone with PTSD has trauma, but not everyone with trauma has PTSD. That's a good reminder, because trauma can be anything, but not every kind of trauma results in PTSD.
Okay, so stress is caused by a specific event. Most people experience stress in their life. And when a situation is resolved, the stress surrounding that situation goes away. But with anxiety, it's a diagnosable condition and treatable by medication. People can feel anxious, but it isn't necessarily anxiety. And anxiety can be for no reason at all and isn't always easily resolved.
I wanted to add something to that. With anxiety, a lot of times a trusted adult may ask, "What's wrong?" And that's not a bad thing. It's okay to ask what's wrong. That means you care. But sometimes with anxiety, there is no specific label. You don't know what is going on in your life. There could be many factors that come into play. As we see here, stress is caused by a specific event. And a lot of times, stress can be healthy. It can help you move forward with tasks. It can help you feel like you need to get something done. But when it progresses into something like anxiety, it can feel very, how to explain this? Yes, crippling, thank you. Yes, perfect word.
And there's no resolution.
There's no resolution for it. It's a lot. And I feel like nowadays, a lot of times, people assume that you can just get rid of it. And that only certain people, that's not good vocabulary to use because everybody might suffer from some kind of anxiety. So when speaking with these two different words, it's very important to have some definitions in mind so that you know what you're talking about. And I'm glad that you are all here to hear this.
Okay. So a friend versus a trusted adult. A friend is a peer, someone who won't always take things seriously and will sometimes participate in shenanigans. A trusted adult takes things more seriously and is a separate person from friends. And they provide a safe space for youth or for a person in a different way that friends do. Here are some traits of a trusted adult. They are someone that can set boundaries.
They're a good listener.
They're non-judgmental. Empathetic.
Knows when to apologize or take criticism.
And makes time.
So when creating a safe space, don't talk down or talk bad about yourself. This is about the child that is with you. Don't victimize yourself. Listen to them. Lead by example and normalize mental health and be willing to talk about struggles. Just talking about anxiety or stress already will minimize it because you're getting it off your chest. It's a lot healthier to talk about it than to let it build up and get worse.
I also feel like leading by example, leading by example is a really big one because just like don't talk down, talk bad about yourself because that is your child looks up to you and looks at like what you do to like build themselves up as a person. And so if you're talking bad about yourself, they may be like, oh, well, she doesn't like this thing about her, but that's me. I have that thing. And it just can create a really bad environment. So understanding youth. Youth today have missed out on a huge part of them growing as people. We went through the pandemic, so we missed out on a big chunk of like school and socialization. We have unlimited internet access. We can see like super traumatizing things on the internet, just like whenever. And we've been through things that you might not be able to understand. We've been through, like shooting threats, lockdowns, those kinds of things. And like we're surrounded by people who use drugs. That's just like a normalized thing kind of now. So it might be kind of hard to empathize with people, but it's still important to try.
So why do youth not talk to adults? So some reasons that your child or just a child might not feel comfortable communicating with you is they might feel intimidated. They might have had bad past experiences with adults in their life. They might be scared to get in trouble if they want to come to you about something that you could potentially be upset with them for. They might be embarrassed and worried that their problems won't be taken seriously by the adult they're talking to.
And with that, I think as a trusted adult, you always want to protect this child and you want to make it the safest environment they can. And if your child is experiencing, let's say they're at a party and they drank and they're drunk, would you rather them be afraid to tell you and drive home in a car drunk, or call you, say, I'm drunk, I really want you to come get me, I don't want to drink and drive, and then maybe the next day talk about it, but just take care of them. It is so much more important to build that trust with your child than have something possibly very horrible happen to them between those two times, because you always want to keep them safe.
And one more thing, just being a trusted adult, that doesn't mean that you're excusing actions that are inexcusable, but it just means not approaching everything with anger and blame. Because you need to teach your kids that, yes, you make mistakes, you should be held accountable for them, but you shouldn't be scared to reach out to adults for help.
Okay, so supporting teens. You should be an active listener. Don't take over conversations and let them lead it, and really just pay attention and be present.
Be open-minded and be open to ideas and opinions, even if it's something you don't necessarily understand.
Know when to be serious, and don't use humor when it won't help. Sometimes that's a very common tactic with parents, to make a joke about it. Sometimes it isn't always the best solution. If you know your child well enough and you know the certain circumstance might be better with humor, maybe, but always approach it tactfully.
What if I'm just really, really funny?
Maybe, I don't know.
That might be a defense mechanism.
Put yourself in their shoes. Really try, sometimes it can be hard to empathize, but there will be some kind of situation where you felt something similar, and you should just really try really hard to understand where they're coming from, because, we're teenagers. Sometimes things seem like a bigger deal to us than they do to you, but you, being that's not a big deal is not going to help us out. It's not going to change how we feel about something.
And then don't give advice unless asked, which I think is a hard one, because there's a lot that you want to tell your children about what you think they should do, or just advise them, but it's better to approach that when they're asking for help than to just put things on them that they might not want to hear.
I wanted to say one more thing from earlier when we were talking about coding, actually, and Imodium. I wanted to actually say something about that. So I not only have an autoimmune disease where I have a colon problem, and so before I was diagnosed, Imodium was one of the only things that actually helped get rid of the symptoms. And I would not say that I took it enough to make it an addiction, but now knowing that it's so easily accessible and that I had to use it, and you don't know whoever is using drugs, because we don't want to ever use the other word. We talked about that yesterday in our club meeting about other people or them or those kinds of people. That language is very disrespectful and can separate you from, it makes you seem, what's the word? Privileged or above, superior. And codeine syrup, I had a whooping cough for almost a month. Imagine that. Pretty horrible. That was right when school closed down, and I had to drink codeine cough syrup. And it was disgusting. But it was one of the only things that helped, because I was I could not breathe. And I just wanted to say that, just to say those drugs, anyone can use them. I just want to emphasize that, and use kind language. That's it. Okay, that's it.
Okay, I'm going to give you a chance to ask that last question into the form. Maybe not.
Go for it. I'm ready.
So, I'm not sure if everyone in the room knows who has the computer over there. That's my Nicole. She's our fearless leader in this school. She's our principal. And she has been curating the questions on the back end while you ask them. So if you have another question to ask, get it in right now, because I think we're going to pull all our presenters up here, and if you just want to stand, if that feels okay, you can sit on the desk. Yeah. And we're going to try and use 2 different microphones. So,
can I just say one thing?
Sure.
before this all started, I went to their table. If you have a chance to go to their table, I had such a great conversation with these four that was just unbelievable. And I said, I just want to applaud you for that. I was definitely not like that when I was in high school.
All right, so we have a lot of questions. I have tried to kind of get the themes and narrow them. So if your question was not asked, I'm assuming that all of these people would be happy to answer them individually, but I'm going to try to go for the themes. So we're going to start kind of where we began. There's a lot of questions about Narcan. Is there any risk to administering Narcan if it's not an overdose?
Oh, no. No, there's no effects. You can go ahead and give Narcan. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If you remember, if they're breathing fine, you still want to give them Narcan, and if they're unconscious, it's not going to hurt them. So there's no adverse effects.
If you read the drug insert, it's going to list every possible symptoms, but those are the symptoms of withdrawal, what somebody could experience when you kick that opioid off its receptor.
Yeah,
there's no downside at all.
To really like eat the mic.
Next year.
Yeah.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Better.
Oh, yeah.
You got
I will add, you really, really do. Ideally, you want to make sure the person is overdosing and not just high, because you can't kick them into withdrawal. They can be very upset with you. We will sometimes say, I'm about to Narcan you. If they say no, then they're not overdosing.
If they're awake and talking to you, yeah, don't give it to them. And especially remember if you check their responsiveness and they start to wake up and feel, hey, they don't need Narcan.
All right, next up, can you keep Narcan in your car, or are there certain temperatures that need to be kept at, and does it expire?
It does expire. It's a 2-year shelf life. We just heard from one of the manufacturers say they just extended a year, so now it's 3 years. Yeah, temperature can affect the effectiveness of it. So if it's really hot, yeah, or really, really cold, you probably should take it out of your car. We had the same discussion yesterday with somebody. Yeah, if it's too hot, you should probably take it out of your car. I can't remember what it says on the insert about temperature.
86 degrees. I haven't worried about the low end, but 86 degrees for the top temperature. We have to make sure that it's stored safely here. I think there was one other thing I was going to say.
Expired Narcan is better than no Narcan.
Yeah.
Stored incorrectly.
The Department of Health said we can use expired Narcan, so we will always have unexpired that we use first, but we will keep our expired and write expired, use last, and keep it on hand for, just because.
All right, I went to Haiti at the first earthquake, and a lot of medications that we brought were all expired.
How many doses are in each Narcan?
There are 4 milligrams in our kits, so if you get a kit from us, there's 8 milligrams of Narcan.
So one box has the 2 doses in it, so when we have our, heaven forbid, something at school, somebody rushes with our grab and go kit, it's going to have a box, we'll give the 1 dose, and in 3 minutes, if we need to give the second, then we've got those 2 doses.
But each device is only one dose. So
dose.
once you plunge it, it's done.
And then we'll find our expired doses.
And that's 4 milligrams. One spray is 4 milligrams.
Can you talk at all about the Good Samaritan laws or the protections for giving Narcan and any implications that come from that administration?
Mike or yelling better? What do you guys like?
Yelling.
Okay. Yeah, so there are 2 Good Samaritan laws, actually. One, it just protects anyone who is responding in good faith, trying to help someone out who has been in an accident, been in an injury, trying to save their life. So if you accidentally do something wrong, you're protected against hurting them as long as you're acting in good faith. The second one is specifically related to drugs, and that is if there are drugs seen at the scene of the crime, sorry, we're making it not a crime. If there are drugs seen at the overdose, you are not liable for prosecution if you are calling 911 to get help. There are a couple exceptions if this is like a dealing situation where you're a drug dealer and you have a warehouse full of drugs, or if there's a warrant out for your arrest, those are exceptions. But if you're at a party, someone is using drugs, even if you're the person using drugs, you call for help, you get safety, you are not going to be prosecuted because there are drugs at the scene. And for young people, that applies to alcohol being present as well if you're under 21.
No, I was just gonna say, as part of our harm reduction, that is one of our messages for teens is please call 911. Save that life. Don't worry about getting in trouble. You're not gonna.
And the other thing about calling 911, even if you forget how to give Narcan, our telecommunicators here in Bellingham and for Whatcom County, they can walk you right through it. So even if you forget how to do it, they'll walk you right through it. The other part is that, well, how do I know that person wants to have any kind of care? Well, if they're unconscious, we look at implied consent that they really do want us to help them. So don't worry about that. The other part, legally, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't pretend to be one, I don't play one on TV. But just remember, you can be sued for anything. The key thing is, can you be sued successfully? That's the key question. We get that question, I get that question all the time. Can I be sued? Yes, I can be sued tonight for something. But can I be sued successfully? And that's the key.
All right. Next question. If you suspect that your child may identify as LGBTQ+, but is afraid to tell you, what is the best way to start that conversation?
Well, I think to some extent it depends on the age of the child and also just the personality of your kiddo. But I think a great approach would be, well, first of all, to have conversations about inclusivity and the difference in people and the difference in families since the time your littles are little. But make an effort to be to say positive things about people who are different than you, and in particular LGBTQ people. Make an effort to say, hey, did you see that there's Pride happening this weekend? We should all go as a family to be supportive of this community, right? If you hear anti-LGBTQ language, speak up, right? Show your kids that you're not going to tolerate negative attitudes towards LGBTQ plus people. What you're trying to do is create an environment where your young person is going to believe that if they tell you that they have either questions about who they are or they've come to terms with an LGBTQ identity, that you're going to be accepting of them and that you're going to take them seriously. What you all said about the trusted adult thing, like, I want to take you everywhere. Yeah, totally. Yeah, please.
So I know from having teenagers that sometimes kids don't want to talk about who they like, right? Or they don't want to talk, even though you have a wonderful relationship with them, that is private information that they don't want to share until they're ready to share it. So just because you do everything right doesn't mean that your kid is going to come out to you. Yeah. You can have a loving, inclusive home where you talk about things from the minute they're born and understand, and you have community members that are out, and it's an affirming household, and still your kid will be nervous about telling you about their gender or sexual identity. That doesn't mean you necessarily did anything wrong. That just shows you the kind of weight that a lot of young people are living under as they develop their identities. That fear of coming out may have nothing to do with you and may have everything to do with just the context around them. So if you do feel like you're raising your children in really inclusive homes and you didn't know about your kid until they were older, don't be hard on yourself. That also happens. So just as a note.
Right, and is it okay if I ask you all a question?
Sure.
Who's the first person that a young person's probably going to come out to?
Friends,
yeah. Right? Yeah, so that's what I see. And then sometimes parents get wind of it and they're like heartsick that their kid hasn't told them yet. Like, well, they're telling their friends. That's natural, that's healthy. And then sometimes after friends, they might tell an adult who maybe doesn't have quite as much power or influence, right, or pull on their heart, see how that goes. And then eventually they might get around to telling their parents. And I think there's a lot of conversation and controversy right now about schools having information about a young person's identity that families don't have. And I say, like, all the more reason to support schools in their efforts to support LGBTQ youth. Because they can facilitate a conversation with families, they can help young people feel safe enough to talk to their families, right? And until that young person, whether they're going to be ready next week or in when they go away to college to tell their family, right? They can help that young person build an important network of support around themselves.
All right, we've got quite a few educators here this evening, and they're wondering, it can be challenging to remember students shifting names and pronouns, especially working in the secondary system who have many different students. Do you have any recommendations for how to really honor the shifting names and pronouns, but also supporting preference?
Yeah, so a couple of tips. First is, at the beginning of every term, whether that's quarters or trimesters or semesters or whatever, have students fill out like a half sheet about who they are, anything important they want you to know as their teacher, right, about maybe things going on at home or things that they've been having a hard time with at school, and ask them what you'd like them to be called, what they'd like to be called in your classroom, and also have a question of what they would like you to call them when you call home. What name would you like me to use when I call home, right? 2 different questions. There are a couple of different strategies I've seen. One is really kind of a student particular strategy, which is I've had a number of really gender fluid students who use different names and pronouns from day to day. And so we've made them some pins that have their name and pronoun. And so they swap those out from day to day so that they are communicating to people around them without even having to be asked what they'd like to be called and what their pronouns are. Another strategy that I've seen work is, particularly in places where there's not assigned seating, is when students come in the room, they can have Velcroed name tags on the wall, not just gender diverse students, but every student, and then students can pick like the right name tag for them that day. So most students are going to pick the same name tag over and over again and slap that on the desk, right? So the educator knows right away what name they want, but some gender diverse students might change what name they want. Put that on the desk. I think another one is just building trust. Young people, particularly those who've had to learn to navigate a world that's not necessarily designed to support them, they have very strong BS detectors. And they're gonna know the difference between an adult who doesn't give a rip and isn't gonna pay attention long enough to like figure this out and get it right, and one who's genuinely trying and maybe screwed it up today. And also, young people who are fluid, very fluid with unfolding names and pronouns also understand that that's a challenge. And I think it's worth pausing and having an offline conversation with them. Hey, I want to get this right. I know that you have a name and pronoun that's changing on the regular, and I really want you to see that like I honor and respect that in my classroom. I know I'm going to screw up. What should we do when I screw up? Right? I think that's a fair question. Do you all have something to add?
Yeah. So I go by 2 different names. I go by my middle name sometimes, and I use any pronouns. So different people use different pronouns for me, and my teachers have recognized when I go into a class with some of my friends and they're calling me a different name, they're like, oh, do you want me to call you this? Do you want me to use those pronouns? And they kind of just pay attention to the people who are around me and what they're saying. Also, we have teachers who I had for a whole semester. We actually had name tents on our desk with our pronouns. We walked in every day during that period, would grab it and have it at our desk. Everyone in the class did. Also, a lot of times in the beginning of the school year, there is a week of icebreakers where you make them, but it's keeping them for the whole year. I know that seems hard, but I think just having them around and for everybody to have them, and I have a teacher who will be like, we're gonna remake our name tags this week for fun. And maybe someone has moved from different pronouns or changed their name, and that can be a time for them to feel safe in that environment. And with misgendering or using the wrong pronouns or name, it's as easy as saying, sorry, I apologize, and then move on, and don't and just change it, change your action. I have messed up my friends, and I've known them for a long time, and I'll be like, oh, so sorry, and then we move on and move forward, and I don't victimize myself. I don't go into a whole I'm so sorry, I messed up, and I don't make it about myself. Yeah. That's important.
Right, that's not a moment to prove your queer bona fides and talk about how your cousin's gay.
Yeah, no.
All right, thank you. Question for the student panel. What is an important thing that an adult can do to lead by example in order to create that safe space that you described?
Talking about like when you're having a bad day sometimes. I mean, don't like dump on your kid. Like, this is exactly what happened. But like, yeah, I'm not feeling the best, so I'm gonna take a bath and read a book, and like showing like coping mechanisms and like that kind of thing.
I also was gonna say healthy coping mechanisms are great. Also, our club, every day we meet, we do name, pronouns, and a check-in. That can be a word, or that can be a sentence. Sometimes we have a friend who talks a lot, so we set a 3-minute timer and we're like, go. But it doesn't matter, but as long as you open up that safe space to share how you feel and show vulnerability yourself, that'll help make the space a lot safer.
I absolutely agree with everything you said. Yeah, I recently just joined the club, and like the first day, they said like say your name, your pronouns, and then check in. Like, okay, check in seems like really scary, but then when I just started going, I just like they were all listening. I was like, what is happening right now? People don't usually listen like this intense, and they were like all listening and like showing that they cared, and it just made my day. So I think that's like such a big part of it too. It's just showing that you listen and showing that you care.
And with that, if someone asks you, how are you? You don't have to always just say, I'm good. Because then if they ask you how you're doing, you're like, well, am I supposed to say that I'm not good? Like, it's kind of, you want to set it up for open discussion. Maybe not in the hallway when you're passing by them, but otherwise, it's important to open up the discussion to have feelings that are maybe not always great.
Okay. All right. Unfortunately, this is going to be our last question, and then we'll open it up. We'll dismiss you guys, and you'll be able to answer questions. All right. Students, everybody wants to know, how do you get your teenager to talk to you? I try all the time, and I can't seem to get students to talk to me. Any hot tips, or from the parents up here who've cracked this code?
Hot tips. What I just said, vulnerability is sharing your life story. That might sound really scary, but if you've had something happen in your life, and you're able to talk about something that's happened to you, then your kid or child or person in front of you is like, wait, I've experienced something like that. Maybe I can share and they won't be mad. Maybe they'll be like understanding. I really think being open yourself first is the key to success. But don't trauma dump, because that makes the kid feel also overwhelmed. It's a happy medium, which I know is everyone's goal.
Spend time with your kid, but don't force them to spend time with you.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, my mom and I talk every night, but it's kind of more of like me like slinking down the stairs and crawling into her room and being like, Mom, can I tell you about my day? And it's not like her like forcing me to hang out with her. And like, I don't know, if you are like, hey, I'm gonna be watching TV, like, if you want, you could come pick a show and we could watch it together, like that kind of thing. Just like making it known that you're making time for them.
Oh, can I say one more thing? Oh. I was gonna say, one thing my mom does is that we go grocery shopping. And I don't know about y'all, but I love grocery shopping. It is so fun. And I think a lot of times when we go, either in the car, I show her my new music. Then that prompts conversations. When I was learning how to drive, I would drive the car. That was always exciting. And also when you're at the store, like, ooh, new foods. That always prompts conversation. I don't know, grocery stores talk a lot. I don't know, they're great. I would say daily tasks and make them fun. That sounds overwhelming, but like washing the dishes, my family, we play a song from Beauty and the Beast. We play Be Our Guest. It's like 6 minutes long, and we try to get it done in that amount of time, and that's like brought our family a lot closer. At 6 minutes, we kill it. It's crazy. But I think just making spaces at home or just like any chores, I personally love that. I don't always love chores. My dad bugs me about my room every day. Love you. But I would say just like keeping it open, just to make your child feel comfortable. That's like our family is incredibly emotional, and we have like family talks. Like we sit in our sunroom. This might not be everyone's family, and I understand that, but I think just having the vulnerability throughout the family really helps. But even if you share, your child may not share, and that's also okay. But continuing to show that you're vulnerable may open up that path at any time and show, what's the word? Intrigue? Like intrigue when they ask you, be like, oh, tell me more. Like, but don't be weird about it because then it's awkward. But then like, you know.
You know what I'm saying. Say it, don't say it, kind of.
Yeah.
Can I answer?
Yes, please.
So I'm not the parent of a teenager, unless 3 teenagers count, but I've worked with a lot of teens, and as an outsider, one of the things that just seems to make them light up is just asking them about the things that they're really excited about. Like, what do they care about? What are they into? And I don't have to know anything. You know, one of the things I loved about your Trusted Adult slide is that you're like separate from friends. So I, at one point, tried to be cool, and then I realized that that wasn't helping. That the thing they want is somebody who they don't have to prove they are cool to, right? And so spending time just like being like, I have no idea how to even pronounce that manga, anime stuff, but I get that it's important to you, and I'm here to listen. And you know, and then even like paying attention, like, oh my gosh, there's like a conference coming. Hey, would you be interested in this? And maybe they just want to go with their friends, but the fact that you pay attention to them is gonna help. So, other parents?
I was just gonna say that if you have that uninterrupted like family dinner, not even every day, but every other day without devices, we always try to have a family dinner, and then we do like popcorn and say to the next person like, how was your day? Or what was the worst thing about your day? What was the best thing about your day? And then just popcorn around the table, but really not having any of our devices at the table. I think that does make a big difference. And I'm in with Sierra about driving. We're in a place that the kids can't get away.
Yeah, you're not looking at each other.
I also would say like my family after school, I feel like I can project pretty well. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
In the back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say we did highlights and lowlights, or Oreo, or whatever you want to call it, where you share, or 2 things that made you laugh, something that made you sad. Stuff like that can open up more discussion and can create keep the conversation going. I feel like sometimes how are you or what's wrong is so short. You don't know how to like explicitly say everything you're feeling, but it's like, okay, this made me laugh today, and that led to this thing, and then also I was sad after that. So I think opening up and actually caring about what they say in that situation. Obviously, everyone gets tired, everyone gets frustrated, everyone has long days, but even if it's a simple moment that you can take out of your day for 10 minutes, it can make that your kid's day a lot better.
All right, I want to give a huge round of applause to our esteemed panel. Thank you so much for coming this evening and sharing this information. I'd also like to give a big thank you to Bethany Barrett, who organized it. And then to each of you for joining us this evening. Bethany's going to do a few closing remarks, but we can't run an academy without each of you coming, and so please continue to come as we continue next year, but a huge thank you.
Where do we find more information about this? Like, it was so hard to find. The only way I found out was because the Whatcom Middle School like put a tiny blurb in the newsletter, but I tried searching online. So how do we find out more about stuff like this?
So this is like purely a C-Home organized event. So we put it out on our website. We sent it as like in Parent Square to our families. I know it's on our Instagram. I know that I sent it out to every principal in middle school, principal at the middle school and high school level, and a lot of them included it in their newsletters. But in the future, I can be better about giving it to the district office central comms team to have them put it maybe on the district website. I mean, I'm also trying to be careful not to overwhelm the system with, like, I'm just a person at the school, So I tried really hard to start small this year. I have really big dreams about what this could be, and maybe even other schools picking up the same idea and doing something similar. So I really appreciate that there's so much enthusiasm about it, and we'll pick it up next year in the fall, and probably have a better calendar going ahead of publishing, like what are the dates and what are the topics. And to that end, I just want to call out the Bellingham Public Schools Foundation. I applied for a grant mid-year that they gave to me in order to help run this event and some other events. So really it started halfway through because then all of a sudden we had money to be able to, do things. So thank you to them for sure. But more importantly, thank you to you for coming. And thank you to these fine presenters up here. And I'll let you chat with them and check out the tables out there and pick up some Narcan if you didn't get it. And thank you to Luke Holker to videotape this whole thing. Thank you, Luke.